Challenging the status quo and conventional wisdom has been my MO ever since I can remember. And maybe these traits are endemic to my generation. Shout out to my fellow Gen Xers, or maybe it's the journalist in me who's been taught to question everything. But whenever something is presented to me as an unassailable truth, that's basically a loud invitation to me to go ahead and debunk it as a myth. And of course, this applies to my attitudes about these sacred cows of podcasting. Anyone who's taken my cohorts or worked with me as a podcast strategy client will tell you I am all about taking down this conventional wisdom. I am all about picking apart these so-called truths and rules of podcasting so that we can build systems and strategies that meet your needs, not the needs of the platforms or a podcaster profile that isn't exactly you. And the one truth that I am so triggered by and so set on re-examining is consistency is key. And I know it's not just in podcasting. This term is particularly in vogue across many industries and practices. If you want to grow your audience, you have to consistently show up on your visibility platform of choice. Our email service providers tell us we'll go to spam jail if we don't consistently send out an email to our audience on a weekly basis at minimum. My Instagram dashboard tells me if I want the glory of engagement, I should post reels way more often. And we hear if you want to grow your muscles, you have to be consistent with that heavy lifting. That one is probably actually true. I wouldn't know. And for podcasting, consistency has been taken to mean releasing episodes every single week on an exact publicly declared day or else. And by the way, Tuesday seems to be particularly popular. We are told to release weekly or else what? We might get a chance to actually catch our breath or experiment with a consistently more forgiving release rhythm, one that meets us where we are instead of the other way around. I think people hear consistency is key and translate it to constancy is key. I think it's no coincidence that the vast majority of podcasts that launch don't survive at all. Literally 90% of indexed podcasts that are out there have ceased publishing because being constantly on is not sustainable, especially for those of us making it a go for it without the backing of the, shall we say, healthy budgets and support staff I was blessed to have in my time at Spotify and Audible. There's this perception that there is so much competition out there in podcasting when the real competition is with your own stamina. The consistency that matters most is being consistently forgiving to yourself when reality sets in and you can't sustain a never-ending weekly release schedule. And one thing I've not been consistent about is introducing myself. Hi, I'm Courtney Reimer, and this is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting and how to build a podcast that builds your business and your thought leadership, not your burnout. I've been working in the podcast world before podcast was even a term and launching shows for literal royalty like Meghan Markle's Archetypes, which, by the way, knocked Joe Rogan off the top spot for a little while, and launching shows with my personal royalty, entrepreneurs and thought leaders who suspect a podcast could be the centerpiece of their content strategies, but are overwhelmed by all of these shoulds and coulds and questions like what microphone should you get? If you really want to know, email me, Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. This episode is another opportunity to look at the dominant paradigm of podcasting a little differently. Today's guest is Julie Fischer, host of 9 to Thrive, the well-being podcast. And as I've been grappling with this question of how has consistency come to be understood as constancy, Julie came to mind. And then I clicked over to her podcast and I immediately know why I thought of her. 9 to Thrive proudly invites its audience to tune in, and I'm quoting here, every other week. Julie has been consistently producing her podcast for 3 years. 3 years. The average podcaster can't make it past episode 3. 90% don't make it past episode 9. And those statistics are a big reason why I decided to undergo this experiment that you're engaging in with me right now of making a podcast and testing that conventional wisdom and see how my own wisdom holds up in practice, not just theory. So In immersing myself in Julie Fischer's podcasting, it occurred to me, in addition to this being a podcast about podcasting, in a way, it's also a show about well-being, or at least a podcast about how not to sacrifice your well-being in pursuit of a podcast that you're told has to look a certain way or release on a certain cadence or be on a certain platform all the time, which makes Julie the perfect person to have this conversation with. Here is my conversation with Julie Fischer. Julie Fischer, I'm so excited to be talking to you. You've been someone I've looked up to as a person who has her own business and has a podcast. And in looking at your podcast feed recently, 9 to Thrive, the Wellbeing Podcast, I noticed that you publish on a very seemingly humane cadence. Your topics obviously are tied to well-being, and lately I occasionally have thoughts about my own well-being when I find myself working on the weekends, for example, or recording an episode on a Sunday, right? There's all of this noise in the podcast industry specifically about consistency, and you got to post all the time, and if you're not, you're going to lose. And I feel that you're living proof that you don't have to, because you've been doing this a while.
I have been doing this a while. I've been coaching for almost a decade. I have been working at the intersection of work, life, and well-being for about 6 years now. And I have been a podcast host. In December, it will be 3 years.
Oh, nice. You've beaten the odds there, Julie.
Interestingly enough, when I started this, I knew that it was going to be an every other week thing for me, because I think I did know my own capacity. I started the podcast because I have this deep feeling that I work in the well-being space, and the well-being space is still a place where you find a lot of people of privilege. I wanted to have a vehicle to talk about well-being that was accessible for everybody and felt accessible for me to actually produce. A weekly podcast for me felt completely overwhelming. My nervous system needs calm and quiet to actually create. So for me, to the question of consistency, I am consistent every other week.
It's funny, right? I appreciate you pointing that out. To me, consistently showing up as often as you can, like this is from someone who really hasn't figured out her own capacity. When you said, I know my capacity, I was like, what's your secret? But I give myself grace. Like if I get it out within every 9 days, that's fine. This is not appointment viewing. Must see TV. Everybody's in front of their TVs waiting for Courtney's podcast.
And I notice even in podcasts that I listen to that come out daily, or they do sort of come out weekly, they don't always come out the same day of the week. They don't always come out at the same time during the day. And just anecdotally, I talk to a lot of people who are like, can't wait to hear what next Tuesday's episode is.
Yes.
So like they know it's not going to be every week.
Yeah. Also, the sort of good elephant in the room here is that you've been doing this for 3 years. And I mean, most people burn out. The majority of people do not make it past episode 3. And you're on episode what?
I'm on episode 69.
I mean, come on, like right there. That's all the proof you need that this consistency theater is equivalent with weekly. For some people, putting out a podcast even every other week seems hard. What was it about this approach that seemed to work for you and seems to still?
For me, the through line has always been conversation. I was not very academic. I mean, Courtney and I met in a community.
Yeah.
We both are adults who have ADHD.
You wonder why my podcast does not come out the same day every week.
Yeah.
I mean, ADHD.
Yeah. And what's so interesting is, of course, I'm a lot older than you, and I wasn't diagnosed when I was younger.
Same.
So I was challenged in school. Like, I didn't love school, but boy, I loved people. And I loved conversation, and I was uber curious. Like my extended family always said, oh, Julie, she has the gift of gab. That was a tagline about me. Sometimes she's a lot. And, that was another part of it. Like she can be a lot. So for me, the podcast format felt so natural because I love conversation. I love talking about things that I'm interested in. At first, I did only episodes with guests, and now I alternate. I do every other. I do solo episodes. They're short. They're usually 15 to 20 minutes. Episodes just talking about topics that I want to talk about around well-being that perhaps I just haven't found somebody who I think is an expert in that field. And so I'm just going to give it my own spin.
In a way, I mean, not to get too, I don't know, heady about it, but you're having a conversation with yourself, and that's helpful too, right?
Audience, right? And my audience. And I'm always inviting interaction. I usually leave people with some sort of action item. I'm always asking people to give me feedback. And anything that I'm talking about on a solo episode, Courtney, is something that I probably need just as much as the audience.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that an underrated aspect of podcasting is the work or the curiosity, because those are two key elements to being a podcaster is gift of gab and curiosity. You can explore your curiosity and follow the thread where it goes. You mentioned, yes, you're in conversation with your audience too, and people forget that, right? They think of it either as a one-way broadcast or they're focused on the guests that they're talking to, but it is and can be an actual conversation with your audience. So do you get feedback from them?
I do. Usually it's people I know.
Sure.
To be perfectly honest.
It's fine.
Not from complete strangers. Although last week, Courtney, for the first time, I got a client.
Yes, we love it.
On my podcast. A coaching client.
Tell me more. I was going to segue into how it works with your business.
Someone recommended my podcast to her, and she listened to like 5 episodes. She's at a crossroads in both her professional and her personal life, and I coach at the intersection of all of it. And she reached out. Of course, I always say, where did you get my name?
Yeah.
It was the first time someone said, I just listened to I was referred to your podcast, and then I reached out to you.
That's the dream. I mean, listen, I do it for lots of reasons, but I'm constantly telling people, you've probably heard this fact that a customer, a buyer, whatever, needs 7 touch points before they will decide to buy. Those 5 episodes took care of, and then you just had to have 2 more.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then we hopped on an exploratory call and sent a proposal. And what's interesting, mostly the feedback comes from subjects that I'm talking about that make people think differently. And I think that maybe that's one of the great things about podcasting. We have the opportunity to bring conversations that expand people's minds, that help them think about things either that they hadn't thought about or think about things differently than they've thought about them. For me, who talks about well-being, first of all, we are living in very complex times. And in these complex times, the majority of us are living at a little bit of dysregulation. The world is stressful. I try to not talk about triggering subjects because there's so much to talk about in the well-being field.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell people whether to put a banana in their smoothie or not.
Not your lane.
It's not.
Banana smoothies are not your lane.
Banana smoothies are not my lane. Supplements aren't my lane. Simple tools, practices, strategies that we can implement to make 1%, 2%, 3% changes in our lives that over the course of a year can make a big impact. And I really try to stay in that lane.
So to continue in the topic of how your business and your podcast are connected or not, do you show up on your podcast the same way you do with your clients?
In a lot of ways, yes. In some ways, no. Because I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, which in one-on-one coaching, people are usually bringing a couple specific things to me. In the podcast, I'm probably talking about some broader things. I will say I've had coaches on the podcast as guests, and we've had some really interesting conversations. Like 2 weeks ago, I had a coach on, and we talked about blind spots. And we both outed our blind spots. And so not unlike I would do in a one-on-one, what's a blind spot? What's not a blind spot? And then what's one that comes up for you? So I do talk on the podcast, Courtney, in ways where someone might be able to learn to coach themselves, right? A little bit. Do you know what I mean? What are the questions I ask myself? What are questions that I might ask a client who comes with a particular situation? Because coaching can be inaccessible for some people. So I want to provide as much value on the podcast as I can.
I was going to say, I heard someone, I'm trying to remember where. It was actually, I think, in the community, the Upside that we're part of. I don't even know the person's name, but they actually called me out by name because I guess I'm known as the podcast strategy person there. They said, I really don't think it's a good idea to have a podcast that's about what you do in your business, because then essentially the whole you're giving it away for free. Why would they buy the cow if they're getting the milk for free? And I heard you say that people might learn to coach themselves and that you do have a call to action. Can you say more about if you're thinking about someone who is a potential client on the other end when you're talking about that? Or does that even come into play?
It's a core value of mine to be in service to other human beings. I do that through my work. Like last week, someone came to me through the podcast. And I am also happy to be providing service to people who may never either be able to or be inclined to, because of fear or whatever, to reach out to me. Often I'm saying on the podcast at the end, hey, if you want to play with this idea, just call me.
I love it.
There are things that I just love playing with. And I don't think everything I have to do in the world has to lead to a sale.
Gosh, I sometimes forget that not everything is capitalism.
Yes, I just don't believe in that.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is, Courtney, if you think about the lane that I live in, I'm trying to change the conversation around work life and well-being because my belief is we're living in an unwell-being crisis. And we have the whole equation upside down. I think the ethos is a sense of scarcity. So work becomes the most important thing in a hustle culture that says more is better, longer hours, muscle through, grit your teeth, and just do it. Then what's left, you bring home for your family and your life.
Yeah.
And after all of that, then I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah.
I just believe in every bone of my body that we have that upside down.
I don't mean to interrupt, but ADHD, I'll forget it. Yeah. I had a total aha moment, and how you said that you can help people through the podcast for people who may not have the means to actually hire you. It's almost like podcast as pro bono work. And I like that.
It's to be in service. I mean, it's to be in service, which, to be perfectly honest, is actually a thing that makes us feel better.
I think part of that is knowing your capacity, which is going to be a never-ending journey for me. So my thing, which is less explicitly about well-being, though there's an underlying message. So I have a couple. One is how a podcast helps you build without burnout, and also how your content in your podcast can work harder for you. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I'm really trying to walk the walk. My podcast is called Talking the Talk, in that I tell people one episode can be the germ of a LinkedIn post, an Instagram reel, because I know, listen, you're already probably exhausted, just like, oh God, do I have to show up in all those places? Which when I started this podcast, I was like, okay, I can barely keep my business afloat, but I am going to do the podcast because it's very on brand. Then I realized, well, not everybody's a podcast person. You know, you talked about the accessibility of meeting yourself where you are in terms of how this format works for you. For instance, my husband hates podcasts. He will never, but he'll read my newsletter, right? So all this to say, is the podcast your thing? I've seen you on LinkedIn. Does your podcast feed that at all? Does it get a second life?
When I started the podcast, I had a whole list of shoulds. Then I realized I needed to do this in the way that felt friendly and accessible for me. So I am underutilizing the video that I can take right out of this.
I'll send it to you. You can use it.
I'm underutilizing it for sure. 2, I do post on LinkedIn and usually on Instagram my podcast episodes. And I know, and I say this not as a should, but I know my content could be working harder for me. Now, just last month, I did take the subject of my solo episode and made that the theme of my newsletter. So that's to say, I know in my heart that I could actually make the podcast content work harder for me, and I'm taking baby steps towards that.
I mean, listen, if folks didn't hear it, Julie's been doing this for 3 years. So there's something to the baby steps method instead of taking it all on at once, which part of the reason I'm doing it is I'm experimenting on behalf of my clients. But I will say that in a way you are already doing it, because it's a thing I'm calling return on thinking. Even just the ideation part, like sometimes you're like, what am I going to write about this week? If you've already thought through it in the container of your podcast, you are getting more out of that moment of your podcast, right? So
yes,
that's meaningful too. Yeah.
Yes. I think what's interesting is I would like to be doing more video. I really would like to hire somebody to help me with video. I just haven't gotten to that yet.
I know some people. People are probably listening like, Courtney, send her my name.
Send her my name.
Yeah.
Because I also have a book idea that's stirring in here.
Yes.
And it's all thematically the same. So then I think I should be doing more video. Why don't you do video? You're great on conversation. You could talk to a camera.
Well, there's something to be said, too, for the whole scientific, like by putting a microscope on something, it changes their behavior. Maybe right now you can show up a little more freely knowing that it's not necessarily going to be broadcast out in the world. Exactly. I don't know if you care about that, but I mean, if the mitochondria behave differently under a microscope, I'm sure that 2 women on a podcast do, too.
Yes. Well, I'm sure people ask you this, or maybe they don't, but the number of people who, when I invite them on the podcast and I say, well, I'm going to be recording in Riverside. And if they haven't recorded in Riverside before, the first question they say is this on video? Mm-hmm. And then the second question is, are you using the video?
Yep. As it should be. I mean, honestly, right?
Yes, for sure. And I always say no guarantee one way or the other, but know that I have video, and
you're capturing it. Yeah.
In my pre-guest form, it says you're agreeing to being promoted in whatever way.
Yeah.
Promote you.
I don't have my language that way, but I think I do say you don't have to show up like you're going to be on the Oscars red carpet, but it will be on camera in case
that's important to you.
It's interesting because you mentioned the book too, and in thinking about sustainability and the purpose of a podcast and how it's met you where you are, it's funny, I have 2 very divergent opinions of what a podcast can do for you. One of them has no immediate capitalistic return, which is just that idea container. And one of my clients right now, part of what she wants to do in her podcast is kind of kick the tires of different ideas that she has and just feel how she feels talking about them, and maybe what the audience responds to. But that's secondary to, is this really a thing? Yeah. And I'm curious for you if that intersection of just working out some ideas for the book has come up.
Sometimes that is like what resonates, what's interesting to me. I will say sometimes there are subjects that I think I'm interested in, and then I go to do research on them and I'm like, yeah, meh.
It's like an inch deep.
It's like, I don't think that's that interesting. I don't know where I'd go with that. Interestingly enough, one of the things I'm playing with is, we have DISC assessments and we have Myers-Briggs. We have all of these professional assessments, and we don't have an assessment for well-being.
People love that stuff.
Sometimes the topics that I'm talking about in the podcast are like, is this a piece of well-being? Like, would this be a significant piece? If I were to create some sort of assessment as it might relate to a book, right? So if you start with an assessment, you're looking at these different areas of your life, and you are, let's say, overall at a 7, but in this area of your life, you're at a 3. What are practices, strategies, and tools that help enhance this area? There's something about that, because most of us are definitely, if even just in terms of life satisfaction, would answer differently in one area than another.
And one day than another,
and one
honestly.
day. Right. Like one day work could suck.
Mm-hmm.
right? One day you can have a blow up with your partner. One day you can have the most challenging day with your children or your aging parents or whatever that is. What are the tools and strategies for sort of those big areas in our life that are really meaningful?
Yeah.
That we do want to be, say, a 7 or above. Like 70% of the time we want to feel good. 100, 10 out of 10, that's not realistic because life doesn't work that way. And that's not really the goal.
Right. Even though some of us think we can, if we just work hard enough.
If we just work hard, right. Part of that is dispelling that. It's not about muscling our way through. It's actually about, what if I loosen the grip? Our well-being is not a destination. It's all about a journey, and it has tons of seasons and chapters. What are we doing? And how are we titrating? When work sucks, what are we doing? And we don't have any control over some of the suck, right? Yeah. So I mean,
it makes me think about when I was laid off from Spotify, which felt catastrophic at the time. But my husband, who isn't known to be very zen, I was like the Tasmanian devil in our kitchen, just freaking out because I could feel it coming. It was before it happened. And he said to me, "You're not your job." That's when I knew that I needed to have that not be my identity.
Yes.
Except now my identity is podcasts. So I might need to titrate a little bit back from that. Okay, I'm using Julie's appearance here on this podcast as a little bit of my own coaching. But I've been leaning into the things that bring me joy in my business, which is to the detriment of my bookkeeping.
That does not bring me joy, to be clear.
Does it bring anyone joy? It must. It must bring someone joy. There's a lid for every job pot out there. But I've found that even the joyous things, if you force them, become less joyous, which kind of comes back to you chose podcasting, but you deliberately gave yourself a reasonable pace and level of work on it.
Yes. And there are even times I'm sort of a girl of summer. Like I really like to slow down in the summer.
Yeah.
And I haven't chosen my topic for next week's episode yet.
Girl, sometimes it's the day before.
Right?
You got yours today from me.
There are times that even every other week I'm like, oh, geez, wow, this is feeling a little this. And you know what? Then it's my reminder. Well, I choose this, right? Mm-hmm. If I want to hold on to a story that it has to be next Tuesday, then that's a me thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's a me issue.
You're running that show.
I'm running that show. And if I'm running that hustle and I want to stay in that hustle, that's my choice. But I can get off that hustle bus anytime I want.
I'm truly in awe of the 3 years thing, and I hate to belabor it, but it is a podcast about podcasting. Have you ever thought about, maybe not, or changing it in any way?
Yes. I think last year I was really in a creative slump. It was probably at the beginning of the summer last year. My daughter got married in May, and I put a lot of creative energy into that. Coming out of that, I really was in a creative slump.
Or a creative hangover.
Hangover. Exactly.
I can relate to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought, oh God, should I just take the summer off? I did a series of just solo episodes just to work my muscle, just doing my reps. Then it felt like a 3-pounder. You know, I was certainly not heavy lifting. The first couple felt a little forced, meaning I didn't feel overly inspired. Yet once I did the thing, it reminded me why I started this thing in the first place. Probably by the third one, I was like, I actually now remember why this brings me joy.
Yeah. This is like controversial, but people say the same thing about when you're in a dry spell with your partner, like, just go do it. And guess what?
Do it.
You'll enjoy it. You'll remember that you actually
remember. Exactly.
You did not see the podcasting and sex correlation
Exactly.
coming.
There's an overlap.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It is pleasurable. All right. How do I come back from that? That's so funny. I've been thinking about how I tend to make it not all business, but podcasting is my business. So I focus on that a lot. I've mentioned my husband like 3 times here. I don't usually. Does Julie bring all of Julie to her podcast, or are there parts that are just, no, it doesn't fit the story you're trying to tell there?
I bring a lot of myself to the podcast. I tell stories about myself. I tell stories about narratives that I've held or mindset shifts I've had. I bring a lot of myself. I talk about my family when it's relevant, and they did not consent to be participants on my podcast. So I'm conscious of not divulging conversations that I think they might not want me sharing, but I will say things like, oh, my daughters and I were talking about blah, blah, blah.
I mean, I think that's part of the magic of podcasting is you're having this intimate in your ear experience.
I think it goes back to if the podcast is at all related to our business, people buy from people.
Yeah.
I mean, I just really believe that. And we live in this, everything's AI. And I'm still such a huge believer that one of the surefire ways to increase your well-being is connect with other human beings.
Absolutely.
And we connect through stories. We're meaning makers as human beings. We want to make sense of things, and we make sense of things out of story. The more people know you, like they make sense of you.
When you think about the guests that you have on your podcast, is there a certain attributes that you look for? Is it fellow well-being practitioners? How do you choose them?
A lot of times someone's reached out to me and I say, oh, that's really interesting. And a lot of times I'm saying thank you, but no thank you to those people who reach out because they are subjects that I don't touch at all. Then there are people that I seek out because I want to have a conversation about something and I've either been connected to them or I've looked for them.
Because there might be people listening who are, I want to just like talk to Julie. What makes a good guest pitch versus a bad one?
Well, first of all, listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
Because I get letters from people who've obviously scanned the title of my podcast and they have never listened to it. And they are pitching me something that if they had listened, they would know that this isn't a subject I would talk about. That would be number one.
Yeah.
So for all you guys out there who want to get on podcasts, or even if you are an agency who's doing this for other people or a PR person who's doing it for other people, please, God, take a listen.
Bare minimum.
Tell me something you learned from me. Because again, this isn't a transaction. I hope my audience never thinks of anything I'm sharing with them as a transaction. I don't want my guests to feel like a transaction. I want it to be relational. So tell me you know something about my podcast, or you listen to an episode, even fake it. Even if you listen to one
Read
episode,
the transcript for crying out loud.
Read the transcript. I mean, read the show notes. If I had a pet peeve, that's my pet peeve. The people who send me some blind pitch email and they have clearly never listened to the podcast.
Some folks just don't even want to do the bare minimum.
Yes, and then they're not for me.
That's right. Okay, I appreciate you. My blood pressure, I wish I had one of those sleeves to check. Since the beginning of our episode, it has definitely become better. Okay, some rapid fire questions, which I'm not good at keeping rapid myself, but we'll do our best. What's one thing people who are podcasting or thinking about podcasting overthink?
I think they overthink how often they have to do it. I think they think it has to be perfect. There's nothing about the human experience that is perfect. Just do it.
I could not agree more. I can't necessarily follow that advice. I'm always tinkering.
It's okay.
What would be a good reason to miss your Tuesday that you set up to release your podcast?
A good reason for me to not do it would be if someone I loved needed me for something.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
absolutely.
do it.
We didn't talk at all about metrics, but what looks like a success metric for you in your podcast?
I don't follow the metrics.
What is something that makes you want to keep podcasting?
Anytime someone sends me a text or writes a review and tells me that they learned something, or when I have a guest on, if I have a great conversation, it just reminds me I was meant to do this.
Yes, you were. I love it. And by the way, those are all success metrics in disguise. Okay, this is a fill in a blank. If your podcast feels like a chore, blank.
Remember why you first got into it. What was it that drew you to podcasting in the beginning? Does that still bring you joy? Here's the other thing. Do not get into podcasting if you think it is not going to bring you joy. This is such a great source of joy for me. Mm-hmm. So if you don't think it's going to bring you joy, don't do it. if you get into it and you're on the struggle bus and you remind yourself why you first got into it and that doesn't bring you joy anymore, then I think that's
It's okay. It's okay to move on.
Okay. Like it's okay to
call
move
it.
on.
Yeah.
It's okay to call it because this should be joyful.
Agree. Completely. Okay, there's one I always close with. If someone is either thinking about starting a podcast or trying to not become another pod fade statistic, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
Know your why. I got to go with Simon Sinek. Know your why. Why are you doing this? I think if you don't have a clear why, whatever your subject matter is, whatever the topic is not something that you feel passionate about, you're probably not going to stick with it.
And it's going to show.
It's not easy.
Your audience is going to know too.
Yeah. And you're probably not going to stick with it. Pick the thing you know and love.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, thank you, Julie Fischer. I'll have to invent another reason for you to come on because I feel excellent in your presence.
Anytime.
Okay, I wasn't going to pull out the dictionary like I so often do, but honestly, I think the consistency we should strive for is the one that I found in Merriam-Webster and is usually the one we use when we're talking about texture or feeling. Here's the short version. Consistency is the way in which a substance holds together. Holds together, guys. Holds together, as in the opposite of falling apart or pod fading or abandoning your podcast. The other definition in there feels like this tech bro hustle culture that I suspected fuels the consistency myth that isn't realistic for people like me, and I'm guessing you. It is the achievement of a level of performance that does not vary greatly in quality over time. I mean, honestly, I do like variation in my level of performance, both for reasons of stamina, but also I would like to not be the same quality this time next year. Not varying greatly is basically another way of saying boring. But seriously, going with the way in which this whole episode has been about, continually being present for your audience takes having the right support systems and strategies in place. Because even if you have landed on a release rhythm that actually fits your life, and I sincerely hope you do, and that you give yourself permission to bend the so-called rules so that they allow you to stick with your podcast for at least as long as you dreamed you would, there's still going to be weeks when your confidence disappears, your ideas dry up, or your business gets busy, or you overcommit, or life just does what it does. Podcasting consistently doesn't mean having a ton of rigid discipline. It means having options for when discipline sneaks out the back door. Or as Julie said, getting off the hustle bus when and where you need to. This is a long way of saying having a strong, reliable podcast requires frameworks and a network that can help you keep going when you know you want to, but it feels harder than you thought it would. In short, it takes a village to raise a healthy and strong podcast. I guess that's another sacred cow I'm challenging. The idea that podcasting has to be a solo sport or a, at most, co-hosted sport, it doesn't. And that's why I am actually building a village that supports and helps podcasters grow and build together. A place to troubleshoot the sticky moments, borrow confidence when yours is running low, and make sure your podcast keeps earning its keep without asking you to sacrifice your well-being in return. If that sounds like the kind of village you'd like to be part of, or at least hear more about, the best place to get the latest on what I'm building is my newsletter, Sounds Great on Paper. You can sign up at my website, soundsgreatstrategy.com. You got to scroll down a little bit or look at the top nav. It should just say newsletter. Or you can email me directly, Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. Though judging by the flagged for follow-up pileup in my inbox, you'll more consistently get news on what I'm building if you sign up for my newsletter, which publishes every week-ish. Okay, this has been Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting. I am Courtney Reimer. Until next time, keep showing up as long and as often serves you, not somebody else's fake rule book. And thanks for creating in ways that meet you and your audience where you and they are. I'll see you next week-ish.